I want to talk a little bit about the history of binding, but actually, more important than the history of binding is the kind of binding, depending on the project or the package that you're going to be working on, because that says a lot about the quality of your project. And if you want to stand out from the crowd and you want to look like a quality company or a quality brand, how you bind things is going to be really important. So I wanted to show you a couple different binding techniques that are out there because there's quite a bit you can do when it comes to binding. Okay, we're probably very familiar with most of binding basics, but I want to cover a few. Saddle stitch is your typical binding. Okay, you'll see your magazine, and it literally is like folding it over like a saddle. That's why they call it saddle stitching. So that's saddle stitch binding. Very, very popular, more cost effective. You typically have your staples that go right down the middle of the binding. So that's saddle stitching. Then we have loop stitching. Okay, loop stitching here, you've seen these for presentations and such, of literally adding loops. Side stitching. Okay, side stitching would be, instead of saddle, you actually have these staples, and there's usually a seam here, right here. Okay, so that's side stitching. Perfect binding is like your better quality books, your better quality magazines is perfect binding. It literally it does not open flat. It's perfectly bound. It's actually glued together, and that's why it really doesn't matter how many pages you have, as opposed to saddle stitch. You have to be mindful of how many pages you have. You have lay flat binding like this. You see a lot of books like that where they actually have it kind of wraps around the paper. You have notch binding. There are actually little notches in there. It's another popular type of binding. There's sewn. You can sew the edges, sewing a bunch of little mini booklets together, if you will. So you can see there's a lot of varieties of binding.